Okay, for this next project we are going to use Adobe Photoshop to create a collage of Polaroids that makes a picture. And let me just go ahead and give you an example so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. Here we have a picture, and let me get this to fit on screen. Here we have a picture of the Pay It Forward, or excuse me, of the Powder Puff game. And you see it's a group picture. And what we basically have done is used Photoshop to create, I think, 8 separate kind of Polaroid snapshots that are used as a collage to create this picture. And it's a pretty neat effect. It's a pretty simple effect, although you have to make sure you follow the steps closely, so we'll go ahead and go through that. What I'm going to do is I am just going to go ahead and let's minimize that, and I'm going to bring up a picture from the Pay It Forward Day that we just had here at the high school. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this picture and we're going to create about 5 or 6 little Polaroids on it. Now the first step is really easy, but I want you guys to make sure as you go through this you follow all the steps exactly as we do them here. You name all the layers exactly as we name them. That's very important so that when you follow future instructions you have the same names of layers going on. It'll make it a lot simpler. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate my background layer, and the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to click on it and drag it down to the bottom of my layers palette onto my new layer icon, and it's going to go ahead and rename a new layer, and it's going to name it background copy. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I'm going to change that to layer 1. We want that to be named layer 1. So right now we have our original background and then we have layer 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a second layer, and I want it to be in between these 2 layers. So I'm going to click on my original background layer and I'll come down to my new layer icon and I'll go ahead and click on that. And you see it creates a second layer and it names it layer 2. Now what I want to do with this layer is I'm going to fill it with a color. It doesn't really matter what color you want it to be. You can change it later on at the end of the project. It'll matter at the end of the project. But for now you want it to be a light color. You want to be able to see what you're doing on it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to choose like a light yellow. And I'll go ahead and grab my paint bucket tool and I'll just come out here and I'll just click and drop yellow on my layer. Now if you notice here in my work area I still see the pictures of the students working. But if I look over at my layers palette, I know I've been successful because layer 2 is now a yellow color. The reason you don't see it here is because we have layer 1 on top in the stacking order. If I would take away the visibility, you can see I have this yellowish background. But I'll go ahead and bring the visibility back to layer 1. The way you know you've been successful is by just checking right there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to once again create another layer. And I want this one to go between layer 1 and layer 2. So I'm just going to highlight layer 2, come down to my new layer icon, and I'll click on it, and you see it'll rename it as layer 3. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. That's perfect. So now we're ready to go ahead and start creating our first Polaroid. And the way I'm going to do it is very simple. I'm just going to go up here and I'm just going to grab my rectangular marquee tool. And I'm just going to come out here and click on this student, and I'm just going to kind of draw like a Polaroid type picture, which is a little bit taller than it is wider. And so I'm just going to draw it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can adjust it later on, but there I have something. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this area with black. So I have to come down here to my colors, and I'm just going to choose my foreground color. I'm going to change it to black. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my paint bucket and I'm just going to fill. And once again you see nothing happens here, but if I come over to my layers palette and look at layer 3, you can see I have this black area right there where I filled it in. Once again I'll take away the layer visibility of my top layer and you can see what I have. I have the yellow background with kind of this black area. What this black area is going to do is this is going to help us create what's called a clipping mask. So this is telling Adobe Photoshop what area we want to clip. So let me go ahead and bring back layer 1, and I'm going to go ahead and create my clipping mask. Now the most important thing when you create your clipping mask is you have to have layer 1, your top layer, selected. Okay, this has to be selected. And from that point I'll just go up to my menu bar and I will go to layer, and about a third of the way down I'll see a little choice that says create clipping mask. I'll go ahead and click on that, And voila, I've created my clipping mask. I've cut out the rest of the picture, and I just have this picture that I had selected on my yellow background. Now, we're starting to make our first Polaroid. We're kind of like halfway through. If I bring up my example, you can see we kind of have an example right here of a student that is has been clipped. But you notice he has this white kind of Polaroid section around him. So that's what we need to create next. And it's pretty simple to do. All I'm going to do is I'm going to create yet another new layer, but I need this one to go between layers 2 and 3. So I'll click on layer 2, and I'll come down to my new layer icon, and it creates my new layer, and it names it layer 4, which is exactly what I want. Now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool again, and I'm just going to draw around the perimeter of this picture. I'm just going to leave a little bit of space to create my edges around the top, bottom, left and right. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my bottom a little bit more, just like the old-fashioned Polaroids used to have that white area down there at the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and let go. And now I'm just going to make my foreground color white, and I'm going to grab my paint bucket, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this area. And there we go. I have my little white area that is around my picture, creating kind of my Polaroid look. Now, the final thing I'm going to do to layer 4 here before we're really ready to get going is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come down with layer 4 highlighted. I'm going to come down to my layer styles icon, and I'm going to add a little bit of drop shadow. And before I do that, just kind of watch the left hand side and the bottom here. When I add the drop shadow, you see you get that little bit of shadow showing up there. If you want to mess with these settings on the drop shadow, you can. I'm not going to. I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And we have our first Polaroid that has been created. There you see we have the picture, we have a little bit of drop shadow, and we're looking good. Now, what I'm going to do is I have created my first Polaroid, and I am going to use this first created Polaroid to basically create all of my others. But what I need to do is I need to go ahead and group all of the layers that I used to create this Polaroid. And it's a very simple process. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to go ahead and come down here to the bottom of my layers palette, and I'm just going to click on the folder icon. And you see it creates a new folder called Group 1. And it should be at the top of your layers palette. And I'm just going to go ahead then and highlight layers 1, 3, and 4. That's the only 3 layers you want, layers 1, 3, and 4. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to drag them into my Group 1. And now you'll notice they're kind of under my Group 1 folder. I have this little arrow that opens and closes my folder. If I go ahead and close it, you don't see them anymore. I just see Group 1. If I open it, you can see that they're under that folder. So once you get to that point, you've created your first Polaroid, and we'll go to part 2. Okay, now that we've created our first Polaroid, we will use that Polaroid to go ahead and create all of the others. If I bring up my example picture, what I actually did in this picture is I created this Polaroid right here first, this square one, and then I just duplicated it and resized and rotated to create these other 7. So it's a pretty simple process. The first thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is on this first Polaroid, you want to make sure that you keep it square. Do not rotate it. At the very end, if you want to come back and rotate it, you can, but at least in the beginning portions, you want to keep it square. That way when we duplicate it, we have a nice square Polaroid to start with. The process is really simple. I'm just going to come over here to my layers palette, and I have my Group 1 folder with this Polaroid inside of it. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to drag it down here to my new layer icon. So let me just go ahead and drag it down onto my new layer icon, and I'll let go. And you see that I get a second group. Now it says Group 1 copy. What I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go ahead and rename all of these. Just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and rename that Group 2. And now once I have that renamed, I'm just going to go ahead and hit this little arrow here to open up my Group 2 folder. And inside it, I see all of my layers. Now, to create my new Polaroid, I am going to highlight layers 3 and 4. And I can just go ahead and click on layer 3, and I'll hold down Shift and click on layer 4. So they're both highlighted in blue. And now I can just come up and I can just grab my move tool, and you notice I can move my Polaroid around to where I create a second Polaroid. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've created a second Polaroid, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start spicing up the picture a little bit. I'm going to enlarge and rotate this Polaroid, and it's really easy to do. I'll just come up to my menu bar and I'll go to Edit and Free Transform, and now I can just grab my handles and I can drag out my Polaroid and make it a little bit larger or smaller. And if I come down here to the corners, I can just grab it and rotate it and move it around however I want to move it around to get the look that I am going for. Once I get it to where I want to get it, I'm just going to go ahead and hit the Enter key to kind of set what I've done. And now I have my second Polaroid. I'll go ahead and close up Group 2. And now I'm going to make my third Polaroid. Now this step's very important. You want to make sure you always copy Group 1. That is this nice square Polaroid. That's the one we're always going to copy no matter what. So I'll just highlight Group 1. I'll drag it down to my new layer icon again. And you see once again it names it Group 1 Copy, but I'm just going to go ahead and change that to Group 3. And I'll pull down my arrows and I'll highlight layers 3 and 4 once again. And with my move tool, I can just come up here and find my next Polaroid. Okay, and I'll go ahead and go there. I'll go up to Edit and my Free Transform, and I can resize it, and I can rotate it however I want to rotate the image. And then I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Now, one thing you notice as I look up here, and let me go ahead, it's taking its good old time here to set that. One thing you notice is that I kind of have this area right here where this Polaroid overlays on top of this Polaroid. What that's determined by, once again, is the stacking order. I have Group 3 on top of Group 1, so the third Polaroid is on top of the first Polaroid. If I wanted to change that, I could just grab the Group 1 Polaroid and just drag it up and drop it over top of the Group 3 Polaroid, and now you see the difference. The only thing you have to be careful with is sometimes when you drag and drop these, if you're not careful, you will drag it and drop it inside. See there, I just dropped Group 3 inside of Group 1 on accident. So if you would accidentally do that and all of a sudden you're missing a group, you can just go up to Edit and Undo, and now it's back there. You want to make sure that you get it in between and not inside of. So now that I have my third Polaroid, I'll just go ahead and highlight Group 1 again. I'll drag it down to my new layer icon. I got my another copy. I'm just going to rename this Group 4. And at this point the process is pretty easy. I'm just going to go out and grab my layer 3 and layer 4, highlight them, move my picture to where I want it to be. And at this point it's just all about getting creative with what you want to do with these layers. Once I get it to where I want, I'll go to my Free Transform, and I'm going to go to where I can eventually get this entire picture kind of highlighted. So there's that. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And the computer's taking a second, and we're happy with that. So I'll go ahead and close Group 4. Once again, I'm going to duplicate Group 1, and you're kind of getting the idea here. And we'll change it to Group 5. Now you need at least 5 Polaroids, so when you do this you will have at least 5 groups. But I think sometimes the pictures look better the more you can have. So let me just go ahead and drag this down here. I'll Free Transform it. I'm going to go ahead and make this one kind of a little bit bigger just for the sake of time of our project. Let me move it over here a little bit. I'll rotate it a little bit, hit Enter. Okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and let me just create one more group. And I'll name this one Group 6. And this is going to be the final one I do just for the purposes of the time on this video. So I'm going to actually make this one a pretty large Polaroid. Let me just kind of move it right down there. I'll Free Transform this. And like I said, I'm going to make it pretty large, mostly just for the purposes of this video. And I go ahead and hit Enter. And let me rotate it just a little bit. Actually, I need to go back up to Free Transform to rotate that a little bit. And let me go this way. And while we're waiting, okay, so we have something going on. Now, you know, if I was really working on this, I probably wouldn't make these pictures so big, perhaps. Maybe I'd mess with the layer order a little bit. If I bring up my example, you see I've really worked hard to make sure I get everybody in the picture, that no faces are covered or anything like that. What I'm going to do now is I can do a couple different things. Number one, I could mess with this color. I have a yellow color. You see right there I have yellow. Well, let's say I don't want yellow. I could just highlight that picture, and I'll just go ahead and grab my paint bucket, and whatever color I want, in this case let me just grab black here, I could just take out there with my paint bucket, and on that layer go ahead and drop it, and what we will get is a black background instead of a yellow background. So we could kind of go ahead with that. Okay. The other thing that you could do is you could make a final Polaroid that covers the entire picture, and that's what I've done on this. All that I did here was I took my group 1 and I copied it one more time, so we would have group 7, and when I move the 3rd and 4th layers, when I grab my move tool here and I move my 3rd and 4th layers, when I went to free transform, all that I really did was just make sure that my free transform took up my entire picture. Okay. And then I just made it so that I had white edges at both the top and the bottom by where I placed my size of my free transform, and you can just kind of stretch it out until you get it to where you have all of your edges. And that's just kind of a touch by feel thing there. And then I went ahead and hit enter, and then I kind of had a picture inside a picture. So you can do it either way. You can either do a colored background, or you can do a picture inside of a picture. But you need to make sure that you have at least 5 Polaroids on your picture, and that you have all the layers and groups named correctly.